Hi, this is Kevin McLaughlin from the Acme team, and in this podcast I'd like to discuss how you can assess the needs of your learners. I would argue that when designing or revising any program within medical education, performing a learning needs assessment is an essential first step. So my learning objective here is that by the end of this podcast, you'll be able to discuss different forms of learning needs assessments, and we'll have decided how you intend to gather and analyze data to identify the needs of the learners within your program. A learning needs assessment is a systematic process whereby data are collected and then analysed, and from this a decision is made regarding what a specific group of learners needs to learn. Needs assessments can vary with regards to who decides on learning needs and in the focus, depth and methodological rigour of the process. The choice of which data to gather and how to analyse these data is made based upon a specific type of program you are planning. There are different ways of describing the various forms of needs assessment, and in this podcast I will use the framework that was used in this helpful review article on learning needs assessments in the context of medical education. So what are the options for learning needs assessments? If your program has an end of training, certifying or licensing examination, such as the residency training program, then the body overseeing this assessment decides what the learners need to know, and this need is articulated in a set of assessment standards used to determine satisfactory knowledge, skills, attitudes and performance for this level of training. This type of needs assessment, which doesn't have any input from learners, program director or teachers within the program, is referred to as a normative needs assessment. When there is a normative needs assessment linked to your program, this doesn't mean that you can't add your own needs assessment on top of this. It just means that in order for learners to gain certification or licensure, they must demonstrate that they have met the standards of the normative needs assessment. The next way to perform a needs assessment is to ask the learners what they think they need to know, which is a perceived needs assessment, or what they want to know, which is an expressed needs assessment. These data are typically gathered using a questionnaire that is an efficient way of sampling the opinions of a large number of learners, and usually provides numerical data, although it can also include qualitative data in the form of free text comments. Richer qualitative data can be gathered from learners by interviews, either of individuals or groups. These data are more difficult to analyse, and this process requires more time and other resources, but can give you a much deeper understanding of your learners and their learning needs. An alternative approach to determining the learner's needs is to ask the program director and other teachers who have experience in training learners within this program. Similar to the way of gathering data from learners, we can gather input from teachers via questionnaires or focus group interviews and use these data to create a prescribed needs assessment. Sometimes our focus is narrower than the whole group if, for example, there is a specific cohort of learners who are underperforming, in which case we may gather both performance data and the opinions of teachers in the form of a comparative needs assessment, which is really just a prescribed needs assessment for a smaller cohort of learners. One advantage of gathering data from teachers is that we can identify what learners don't know they need to know. Sometimes we need to go beyond learners and teachers to fully identify these needs in the form of an unperceived needs assessment. This might require data from allied health professionals, again in the form of questionnaires or interviews. Alternatively, we may need to gather deeper and more specific performance data on a cohort of learners via chart audits, chart-stimulated recall, or by directly observing their performance with real standardized or simulated patients. Finally, because medical training is best viewed as a complex adaptive system where multiple variables such as learning context, teachers and other learners, patients and families can all impact the learning, we occasionally need to perform an environmental scan to fully identify learning needs and ways to meet these. And this is a very thorough process and resource intensive form of needs assessment. So hopefully you're now in a position to discuss the different types of needs assessment and also decide what method of collecting and analysing data is the most appropriate to determine the needs of the learners within your program. If you're not familiar with how to create a questionnaire or conduct a focus group interview for your needs assessment, then there is a podcast in Phase 5 of the Acme tool entitled How to Support the Validity of Your Program Evaluation that can help you develop these tools. Thanks for viewing this podcast. I hope you found it helpful, and please reach out if you have any questions or suggestions on how to improve the Acme tool.